I drop a question and then I have the feeling, apparently this question did not land well. It's difficult. Maybe it wasn't appropriate. It's not her role as a coach to fix the client's problems. So the client actually needs to be ready, willing, and eager to do this work.
You got to shut up at times.
And I already start my mental narrative of what did I do wrong?
So your lesson for 2026 is be unprepared and just wing it.
We can imagine a client complaining about a certain issue. And then we come with the question, okay, are there exceptions? Has there been a point when you didn't have that problem? Yeah, maybe there was this one exception, but only this one exception. Okay, let's look at that. What happened there? How did it feel?
What is happening in 2026? What will change for the podcast?
I'll make it as a coach, light the spark inside, empower every soul to turn the tide. I'll make it as a coach, help others grow, changing lives with every story I know.
Welcome to the anniversary episode and the very last episode of The Making of a Coach. What? The last episode? Are we stopping? No, on the contrary, we are giving this podcast a fresh start. Throughout the last 12 months, I've been meeting experienced coaches and unpacked their journey of becoming a coach. How did they get from a job in HR to a flourishing coaching practice? From passion to profession. In my own entrepreneurial journey, these kinds of stories have always been tremendously useful. But of course, the journeys of other people are not enough to make your own. They might be a good starting spark and inspiration, but you will need more fuel on the way. What I realized when reflecting on my podcasting journey, and what I can also see you are most interested in, is the question, how can I make my coaching sessions most impactful? What are the mindset, the methods, the skills, and the tools that I need to be an impactful coach? These are the questions we have also tackled last year in coaching demos, in topical deep dives, but I want to tackle much more explicit this coming year. And therefore, we are rebranding this podcast to Impactful Coach. So on this very special episode, we bid the Making of a Coach farewell. We welcome Impactful Coach, and we look back on all the guest episodes of the last year. We cherry pick some highlights, some methods, tools, skills, and aspects of mindset of my guests that stuck with me. For this exercise, I got myself a very special guest, my long-term friend and business partner, Max Friedle. So warm welcome to you, Max.
Thank you, Toby. Finally, I made it to the podcast.
Yeah, and for everybody who doesn't know you yet, Max, who are you and how do you spend your days currently?
So I am Max. I'm Toby's co-founder. I'm coach, entrepreneur, engineer, adult educator, father, and probably many other roles that in the end define what I do on my daily life. At Metafox, I'm working a lot on our systems, working with our people, the team, of course, co-product development. And my main project at the moment is the Metafox Academy, where we offer certification programs based on the tools that we already have and which all of you like.
Awesome. And as the product owner of the Metafox Inner Journey and the Metafox Academy program in general, you have also developed a coach development framework. You sat down and looked at what does that mean very concretely for me as a human being who wants to do inner development? And also, what does that mean for me as a coach who needs the right skills to develop others?
Yes. So I look in the topic of development from two sides. So we have, in the classical sense, we have the teacher and the student, right? And then from this perspective, we can look at the same coin, which is the teaching, but it has two very distinct perspectives. And the same is, of course, true for coaching, training, facilitation, whenever we manage the interaction between other people. And so looking now at the coach side, I identified 4 different topics: mindset, methods, skills, and tools, and combined those in the coach development framework. So we split the world into what is inside of me and unseen mostly, and what's outside and public. And on the other side, we have the things I do in preparation and what I do in the interaction that I am coaching, the therapy, the training. And if I split up the world with those two different dichotomies, I get these 4 quadrants, which I just mentioned. And that is a very practical model because we can look at what we need to develop as a coach and in which areas and where we're strong, where we're maybe not so strong, where we want to focus. So this gives us a very practical way to look at our own development. And with this, I would say, let's use that framework to reflect the year 2026 and go through the podcast episodes that you recorded, Toby, all the super interesting guests that you had. And let's start with number 1, mindset.
Yeah, if I look at the mindset quadrant, me as a coach and my inner preparation that I do, I think what stuck out most was the role of a coach is to hold space, not to fix the client's problems. And I think that came up in so many different conversations. I think one quote that kind of gave me the essence and that I resonated a lot with was from Pam Ross, a Canadian leadership coach. And she said in her own development, coming from the leader's shoes and then stepping more and more into the facilitator and then coach shoes, she had to realize that it is not the Pam show. This is how she phrased it. So all this practice is not about her and not about how she looks like on the stage, but it's really about creating the space for the client.
I think this is such a nice way to phrase it, the Pam shows. Her being at the center, everybody looking at her, doing then the exact opposite of what they call in teaching from the back of the room.
In the context of teaching, and I think Marie, another coach based in Silicon Valley, she used exactly that phrase. She had to learn, she said, that it is leading from the back of the room. So again, she had to come from a background in HR leadership and also had to realize that, she needs to go metaphorically to the back of the room in order to give the client the space to work through their things. And yet another way to phrase it was from Hélène Foyat, a coach in Belgium. And I think she also talked about a similar realization. And in her case, she even made it her entire brand. So her website, I think, is withhelene.com or something like that. So she realized that what she delivers is not a session by Helene, but it's something with Helene. And that I found, I just saw this reappearing in so many different shades. And it resonated so much because this is also really one of my big development areas, like allowing other people their problems, kind of stepping back and not coming in with my own solution. So I think this is also one of my own biggest limitations as a coach when it comes to the aspect of mindset. And that's why I found it so powerful.
Yeah, I think there's a book I read this year, The Surrender Experiment, which is also about, letting go in the end, just being present and allowing life to happen, allowing your coachee to make their own conclusions and to be aware of your monkey mind, but not giving into it. I'm not saying, get rid of it. That's not going to work, but just being aware of it. Something's coming. It's a thought. I don't have to react to it. I don't have to respond to it. I can come back to my breathing. In the end, it goes back to meditation and everything. It's this sense of letting go and not being held hostage by your mind.
Yeah, and I think we can look at this even on 2 different layers. Like the more general layer is the one, I would say, of identity. That came up a lot in my episode with Todd from the UK. He considers himself a practitioner, not firstly a coach, because he's doing a lot of work with energy and work on your own identity. In the demo coaching that we run, I think this was also a lot about my identity as a know-it-all kind of expert person and wanting things to be perfect. You have this sort of more general layer where you can do this work. And then very practically, I think you also made this hint already, Max. I think you can also do this very tangibly before every session. This Ebony Fakbohi, another German coach, she called it the emotional hygiene work that she needs to do.
I remember that episode.
Yeah.
Making sure that she doesn't bring her own topics into a session, right? Being very conscious about it, taking extra time before getting into a space that she is supposedly holding for her client, and making sure that this space is a clean space, I say, to stick with the hygiene.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think on a general level, we have this letting go of your identities in a way, and on a more concrete level, like this can be a very concrete practice, breathing, body scan, these kinds of things before you go into a session doing this emptying emotional hygiene work.
Perfect. That sounds like a very clear, very well aligned learning in the topic of mindset, which is methods and how we design our sessions, the theories, the methodologies, the things that we can find outside of ourselves, right? If you think back on how to construct the model itself, and which we use in preparation. So what are things that you remember from your conversations that fit into that category?
Yeah, the first thing I noted down when I was also listening back to a few episodes was the session with Kirsten Harcourt, I think also a Canadian coach, who said she only works with clients who are ready, willing, and eager. And this is sort of what she's also doing in the preparation of her sessions in order to have her coaching as impactful as it can be. So she really has this readiness gate. And basically, clients need to be able to pass through this readiness gate because, as we discussed, it's not her role as a coach to fix the client's problems. So the client actually needs to be ready, willing, and eager to do this work.
That's a very nice way to think about it. Yeah, it reminds me of our own quality gate when hiring, right? It's like the person gets it, wants it, and can do it. Plus values fit, but from a technical perspective, we always check these three. And she also has her checks there. Is that going to be somebody I can actually help? Which is super important, are we a fit? And if not, then nobody's going to be happy in the end.
Yeah. And I think even the GROW model has this, like the W in GROW is also this willingness. Of course, that doesn't come at the entrance to the coach, but later. But I think there we also see this theme popping up that it's the responsibility of the client to make the change, and we need their willingness as a precondition.
Yeah. Don't have these, then how can you be the catalyst? Help your client go through the process.
What happens if you put two engineers on a coaching podcast? Talk about activation energy. Cool. Yeah, let's go a bit more tangible into methods.
Yeah.
And I think most impactful on me and my own learning was my diving into solution-focused coaching and brief coaching together with Kirsten Dierolf. And then I also had another episode with the Dutch guy. One of my biggest learning areas and what I learned as a coach was solution-focused coaching. And what I learned from Kirsten Dierolf and my session with Art. Both of them are working a lot with solution-focused and brief coaching. And this was so impactful on me because I found it really inspiring how quick and light coaching can be. And what makes it so quick and light is that you very quickly go to the desired state and you don't spend a lot of time on the problem. So there can be an externalization of the problem. So you give the client the chance to externalize their issue. But then the purpose of this externalization is merely to say, okay, realizing this problem is not part of me, and I can decide what relationship do I want to have with that problem.
And so what does that mean in practice? Like no rambling, no going over the same things over and over again, complaining, whining.
I think it's mainly a question of the questions you ask as a coach. So directing the focus of the client to what works already. And how does the world look like? How do they feel when things work already? So we can imagine a client complaining about a certain issue. And then we come with the question, okay, are there exceptions? Has there been a point when you didn't have that problem? yeah, maybe there was this one exception, but only this one exception. Okay, let's look at that. What happened there? How did it feel? How was the world different? How did other people see you differently? So that's a way. And if they really have a hard time coming up with them, then I think another classic from this is the miracle question, where you say, okay, let's take a step back. Let's just imagine the sun is rising and a miracle has happened and your problem is gone. How is the world different? How do you feel? What is now possible? What can you do? So again, you look at this imagined reality where the problem is gone and you imagine what's possible now.
So you want to create that future state first in the mind and then create it in reality without having to solve every single issue that you have right now. Because first you have to go where you have to know where you're going, and then you can figure out how to get there.
Yeah.
So you have two methods already that you mentioned: the ready, willing, and eager quality gate model, let's say, for determining if a client is good for you and you're good for him. And then on the other hand, we have the solution-focused coaching model.
Yeah. And I think what came up now as we discussed that, as I used the question, how does it feel a lot? And I think that is also something that I, of course, came a lot in touch with in my own coach education in the NLP world. You do a lot of things with the body, but this has also always been relatively difficult for me. So I'm also often stuck in my mind, in my cognition, and finding what I actually feel in my body is surprisingly difficult. This area came up in another session that I had with Jasmin Messerschmidt. It was a session that originally we ran in German. There's a AI-powered transcreation of it online as well. And with her, we worked on pictures. And of course, I had worked on pictures a lot already. But what I found very interesting about her approach, the Zurich resource model, was how she combines the work with pictures with the body. So we did this calibration exercise where she showed me different pictures. One that was very shocking. So it was a picture of a person, of me, almost cutting off their finger when cutting a cucumber. And then she brought me into this body scan. Like, what does this picture do with me? How does it feel? Where do I feel that in my chest, etc.? So we really combined this work with pictures that I had done a lot with sensing the body. So I think that is also an amazing method, especially for the cognitively strong clients as me in this instance.
Very good. Method number 3, the Zurich resource model method to work with picture cards.
Yeah.
Where we also adopted the method. Very nice. So 3 methods overall. And then let's go to quadrant number 3, skills. The things that you can do and that you do repeatedly with your clients, with your participants, with your coaches, in interaction, in the doing, in the moment. So what did you learn on that end?
So this is a lot about how we do conversation with the client, right? And I think what struck me the most here is not how to do conversation with the client, but how to not do conversation with the client. This came also up repeatedly, but I think most prominently, I remember again, Kirsten Harcourt, who said, the magic happens after you have asked a difficult question. So the point I want to get to here is silence as an intervention. And I think having discussed this aspect of, I want to be seen as an expert, as a competent coach, which we discussed earlier, this becomes a very difficult one because in my own coaching practice, I also noticed like I drop a question and then I have the feeling, apparently this question did not land well. It's difficult. Maybe it wasn't appropriate. And I already start my mental narrative of what did I do wrong? But basically, what the point that she made here was that the magic happens exactly in this silence after a difficult question. And as a coach, you also need to have the confidence to let the client and the trust to let the client do the work and give them the space, give them the time to hold the silence and come up with their own solution.
Extremely powerful. I remember that in one of my earlier pre-coach conversations. I was coaching people, wasn't aware what coaching is in that sense. I was talking to my sister back then, And at some point she said, Max, can you just shut up and listen? I was like, okay. Hey, I think I was like 14 or so. And I was like, okay, that's where I learned the lesson that, you got to shut up at times at the right time.
Yeah. Power of silence. I think the practical thing that I took here was this count to 6. So ask your coaching question, stand the silence, count to 6, keep the eye contact, and let the client do the work.
Great. Maybe there's one other skill you want to mention that comes to mind that you connect to the episodes of 2025.
Yeah. I think as we've discussed silence, I think there's sort of the contrary point to that I also would like to make and that I took. For example, from Marie Suits and I think also Ebony Fakui, they both made the similar point of, as a coach, you are not just a yes man, and sometimes it's time to intersect the client. And what I mean here is that we talked a lot now about giving the space to the client. But I think there's also many clients, and I'm definitely one of them, who like building their own theories and mental castles and externalizing all of that and talking a lot about the problem, maybe also talking about the solution, but generally doing lots of talking, being stuck in their sort of cognition mode. And why I'm again referring this to me is because I also know this from my own therapy. So when I do therapy as a client, this also happened a few times that the therapist was really cutting in and asking, Toby, can I stop you there for a moment? And again, bringing me to the body. As you talk about this, how does it feel in your body? Also getting the client out of this cognition mode and reconnecting them with the body. And I think that also requires you as a coach to go in this confrontational stance and actually not giving them the silence maybe, but intersecting in the right time.
I think there's 2 important things that you need to master here. Number 1, you need to get permission beforehand to be invasive and be interrupting, right? So it's part of the contracting that you do in the very beginning. And secondly, you have to be great at observing, is that now a reflection of something new? Or is it basically rambling about something that has happened and trying to reinforce a narrative that we're trying to let go of actually? And so you need to see the world already through your client's eyes to be able to make that kind of judgment and then help them escape in either way, or redirect in either way, not escape.
Yeah, though I actually like the term escape. That's like escape your cognition mode. I think I'm often stuck in the prison of my own cognition, and helping the client escape, I find actually a quite cool metaphor here.
When your mind holds you hostage. I think that's the picture.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
This was actually a difficult one to come up with. And I think looking ahead on 26, this is definitely something I want to do more of, like really digging into the conversational skills or also silence skills and understanding what do great coaches do there to increase their impact.
Amazing. Then we heard now in the skills area of silence and when to not give silence as 2 very important skills. With this, let's move on to the last question, tools, and the question, what do you use there? And as a reminder for our listeners, the tools are the things which are outside of us, existing beyond us, can be used by other people, and we use it in the session. So it can be anything from the application of a model that I have, which is the wheel of life. No, it's an idea, but I can print it out or online, use it and fill it out and actually work with it. And it can, of course, also be one of the physical tools that we offer. And maybe we find other things in our conversation here.
Yeah, exactly. So if I look back at the making of a coach in 2025, we had plenty of tools. We had the wheel of life that you mentioned. We also had beliefs and the inner saboteur assessments. That's one of the most recent ones with Lucy Higgins. There was also working with strengths, for example, and a demo coaching that I ran with Taina and our own strengths discovery tool. And of course, we had pictures and the somatic picture work with Dr. Jasmin Messerschmidt. And I think how we ended up there was one of my very first episodes with Nami Ishihara, who is a facilitator working with groups. She mentioned the Belbin team roles and how it enables teams to talk about their strengths and weaknesses and their patterns in a non-threatening, non-judgmental way. And yeah, this advantage of providing a common language to a group of clients in this case, I think that is something that came up very often with all these kinds of tools.
Yeah. In the end, many tools help us to create that shared language. It often doesn't really matter if you now work with a personality type test, a strength assessment, DISC or MBTI, the big five, all of these things, whatever you use, it gives you a shared language to talk in, and to talk in that there's only one main point to learn here. Other people are different, and that's okay. All of these tools give you a language to, but not only understand conceptually, because everybody is clear on, of course, people are different, but then we don't act like it. So helping with that. And then the other thing that tools really help, I think, especially given the things that you mentioned, the CRM model is to help you to unearth things that you didn't know about yourself. So helping to bring things to the surface that has been dormant or that at least unseen or unclear, but that have been inside of us already. And that is true for the somatic image-based work, but that's also true working with strengths and formulating. Naming is taming. Same goes for emotion work. So in the end, the tools really give you more power in that sense.
And reflecting back on this point of people are different, one quote that comes to mind is from my conversation, from my DISC demo with Rule Shard. And that was that we always learn as children to treat other people as we want to be treated. But his point was, well, actually, wouldn't it be even better if we treat other people as they want to be treated, not as we? So instead of assuming they are the same as us and they have the same needs, which, of course, to some extent, this is true, right? We are all humans. We all look for love, belonging, and understanding. But in the end, people have different preferences. And wouldn't it be awesome if we could take these into account in dealing with people? And so I think this kind of quote comes from the world of DISC, but in the end, it's true for all these different models.
Yeah. And which comes more from a sales perspective, because there you also have the 100% to make exactly that change of perspective. But it tells the same story.
Yeah. And I think another reoccurring theme now, talking about DISC, of course, I also had the scientist, Dr. Ronald Franke from the Link Profiler, who is, to put it mildly, not a fan of DISC. He is very strong on the point that also already one of my first guests, Marie Suits, made, that every personality test or profiling tool can be weaponized in the sense that it ends up serving as a justification for unhealthy behavior. So saying, oh, I'm so red, I'm the dominant one, and that's why I behave in the group like this, and that's why it is okay, which it obviously is not. But of course, that is one thing. I think another issue he's taking there is the boxing of people. So I think it's also always important to acknowledge that the world is gray and it's not red, yellow, green, and blue, but it's always a spectrum. All of these tools, they give us dimensions, and we can be more on the left-hand side or more on the right-hand side, but we are never only on the right-hand side or only on the left-hand side.
I was thinking we get these models and things, they're all wrong. You were saying and all wrong. And so true. In every kind of education program where you learn about whatever profiler or personality type whatsoever, everybody should be required to learn about the Barnum effect in a very experiential way afterwards, to just realize, oh, actually it's just made up and not real. At least not in the real sense that gravity is real and, we can rely on it to work 100%. It's real in a way that it works 10% of the time, and that's already great for psychology.
Yep. So the Forer Barnum effect, right? That means you expose people to a test, you tell them, fill this questionnaire, and then you give them a short personality description and say, this is your result. And afterwards, you tell them that literally every single person gets exactly this description and says, oh, wow, this is so much me. This is, yeah. So that brings us back to the point of maybe we are not so different after all.
Yep. Well, so let me give you a summary of what we talked about in the tools section. We talked about the shared language that we can get by using tools, be it now strength cards, be it assessment, be it Belbin team roles, whatever it is. So to help us understand each other. And then we have tools that help us uncover things that have been dormant or hidden inside of ourselves that we can, for instance, uncover with picture cards, a CRM method. And then in the end, we talked about the weaponization, the possible weaponization of these tools if people self-identify and with this justify their own behavior.
Yeah, so I think what we found in quite a few conversations talking about tools is that it's more powerful to have a few tools at your disposal and become really, really fluent with them. So I think this is a point that Helen from Belgium made, but also Marie suits in one or the other way. And I think, as we saw now when discussing this quadrant, there's really an ocean of different tools. And I think the main takeaway here is to pick your tool and become very fluent.
That really reminds me of one of the teachings in Jiu-Jitsu, and that is, I don't fear the man who practiced 1,000 punches one time, but the one who practiced one punch 1,000 times. They being very intentional on what to be good at and then doubling down and tripling down and 10xing down on that exact thing. Yeah.
Finding the tool and becoming a master.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, thanks so much. I think that concludes our fourth quadrant. So, Max, which one was your highlight and which one would you like to take into your 2026 and apply into your practice?
So for me, definitely Jasmin Messerschmidt's CRM methodology, because although I have been working with images for the last 7 years already, 6 already, no, 8 years, there's still more to learn. And I had not read her work until then, hadn't exactly heard of it, and just did what I thought I could do. But then this really opened up a very nice structured way of doing deep work with picture cards, which we now also adapted for our own program, right? And that connects to what I'm doing in 2026, building the MetaFox Academy Inner Journey program, our first program. On day 2, we actually use that methodology in the context of image cards, and participants really just love it. It's so crazy effective and something that most people have never done and also don't imagine how powerful that can be. What about you?
Yeah, I think I pick what we've discussed in the mindset section, this aspect of not being the expert. It's not the Toby show, but I'm here to hold the space. And that connects very well for me also to the solution-focused coaching world, like bringing in this lightness and seeing just what the client brings instead of always preparing. Because I think when I do coaching, I often have already some idea of what will come up, what will the client bring, and already kind of sort my tools. And I want to do that less. I just want to be there more and then act in the moment instead of preparing and by definition then also bringing biases when doing so.
So you have to unlearn everything you ever learned and be unprepared. So the lesson for 2026 is be unprepared and just wing it.
Exactly. I think unlearning is a great theme. Stop being the good student.
So let's hear what's happening in 2026 with the podcast, because in 2025, you took the initiative, you launched this platform, you invited people, and we always heard from your guests from two sides, right? So we had the coach side with methods and tools and how they bring effectiveness to their clients. And then on the other side, we had this look at their business acumen and how they're building their business. What is happening in 2026 what will change for the podcast?
Yeah. So I think if you listened and saw what we discussed, I think it already becomes quite apparent that when it is about becoming an impactful coach, it is about these things: your mindset, your methods, your skills, and your tools. And that's what I want to bring more. And that's quite different from the starting hypotheses. So if we now sort of build in public and share what was my consideration, then I thought in the very beginning, in my role as the MetaFox co-founder, I've been talking to coaches for years, mostly about how do they do their practice, how do they work with picture cards, etc. But whenever then I asked the question, what is your biggest problem? What comes up most of the time was, well, finding clients, setting up my business. And so when we started the podcast, I also thought, wouldn't it be great to build a resource that helps with that? Because if I look at my own experience as a founder, as an entrepreneur, then I think I always learned a lot in conversations from other people, from people who have walked the path that I am walking. That's exactly what the initial idea was with the podcast. And if we look at the early episodes here, my first conversation with Marcel, with Helene, with Nami, they all were kind of going through the CVs of people. And I think there's a place for that. I believe you can learn as a young, aspiring coach from hearing other people's story. But now when I was listening back to the episodes, like, oh, what were actually the highlights of 2025? It kind of started becoming more interesting with the first coaching demo and Pam Ross here, which I think was sort of, I recorded the session about her work of making work awesome. This is kind of her theme. And sort of accidentally, we did this coaching demo because she talked about her blues and oranges feedback model. And I was curious and dug in a bit more. And afterwards, our producer, Justin, he just cut this out. And I was like, whoa, why did you cut this out? This was like the coolest part of the episode. And he said, well, it was not about her path of becoming a coach. That's exactly what we want to do. And I was like, okay. And we were debating that a bit. And then he said, how about we publish it as a second episode? So this was sort of the inception of getting into the practice, doing coaching demos. Yeah. And we saw this work better and better. So we made it more of a common practice. So we sort of stumbled into this way of work. And I think in 2026, we stop stumbling and we make this intentional.
Yeah. This again shows that no plan survives the contact with reality. And that you have to start somewhere, make mistakes, improve, make some more mistakes, improve, until you find something that works reliably. And so we'll hear more about the nitty-gritty aspects of coaching itself, of team building, maybe supervision, therapy, whoever you have on the show. This is, by the way, the Toby show. I'm going to say the Toby. This one is not the Toby show. No, it is the Toby show. And hear less about the CVs of people, but overall, it will be much more about the practice of coaching and maybe aligning this with the coach development framework. So we have a way to model the different episodes into one coherent story.
Yeah. So if this was a contracting for our common coaching journey, I would say my role will be the one of unpacking what makes an impactful coach, the mindset, methods, skills, and tools behind that.
And that comes with the name Rebrand, the impactful coach. Right?
Exactly. So with a crying and a laughing eye, we will bury the making of a coach, the season, if you want, in podcast speak, and launch the impactful coach. That's it. I say farewell to the making of a coach format. However, you are, of course, very welcome to go back and listen to it. I think all the episodes that we mentioned today and the content that we recorded last year is pretty timeless. And I still believe that the stories of other people have their place to inspire us. At the same time, I'm super excited about opening a new chapter. And I guess this is also a good moment to say thank you to Julika Branke, who has helped me open this new chapter, understand what you want and also understand what MetaFox needs. and has even given this baby its new name. The conversation with Julika where this happened is not on record, unfortunately, but lots of other wisdom from Julika is on the last 2 episodes. So go back to these if you want to make a change in your offering, in your positioning. I will start the Impactful Coach here in 2 weeks to really dig into methods, unpack tools, and learn about the mindset and skills of impactful coaches. Our very first guest in this new format will be Niels Cornelissen, a super experienced executive coach. I've spoken to him yesterday, so I can already promise you a super dense and powerful episode in 2 weeks. Looking forward to have you listening again. I'm Toby, co-founder of MetaBox. Thanks for your support in the last year and all the best in the new one.
I'll make it as a coach, light the spark inside, empower every soul to turn the tide. I'll make it as a coach, help others grow, changing lives with every story I know.